In 2008, California voters were sold a vision, a sleek high-speed rail network connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles in under 3 hours. The plan, 800 miles of track, cutting-edge trains, and a price tag of $33 billion. Completion was set for 2020. It was pitched as the future of clean transportation. Voters approved Proposition 1A, authorizing nearly $10 billion in bonds. But what they didn't know was that the official business plan required by law hadn't even been submitted to the legislature. It arrived late, and according to the state's own legislative analyst's office, it was critically deficient. Missing were details on future funding, capacity, demand, and risk mitigation. The fantasy had already begun to fray. Today, that $33 billion estimate has ballooned to over $126 billion. No high-speed trains are running anywhere in California. Instead, construction is focused on a 119-mile segment in the Central Valley, from Merced to Bakersfield. This truncated route, far from the major coastal cities, has been mocked as a train to nowhere. The original completion date of 2020 is long past the latest draft business plan projects. Phase 1 won't be finished until 2032. Over $5.7 billion has already been spent, with little to show beyond concrete pillars and earthworks. As one board member admitted on national television, even the so-called optimized cost is now north of $125 billion. The numbers are staggering when broken down. The original 2008 budget of $33 billion for the whole system now barely covers the cost of just the Central Valley segment. That stretch from Bakersfield to Merced pencils out to roughly $207 million per mile. To put that in context, high-speed rail in Europe or Japan typically costs a fraction of that. Critics, including transportation researchers at the Hoover Institution, argue that the project was a fantasy from inception. They point out that the state's bond contribution was a fixed $9 billion, but as inflation drove up overall costs, that share shrank from 27% of the total to a sliver, leaving a massive funding gap. The 2008 business plan was legally required to be submitted to the legislature by September 1, 2008, before the bond vote. But the California High-Speed Rail Authority didn't release it until after voters had already approved Proposition 1A. The legislative analyst's office later found the plan was incomplete. It lacked any discussion of future funding sources, how costs would be allocated, or how risks would be mitigated. The route selection process had bypassed standard alternatives analysis. In other words, the foundation of the entire project was built on sand. Without a credible business plan, the authority had no realistic roadmap to deliver the system voters were promised. From the start, cost estimates climbed relentlessly. By 2009, the official number jumped to 42 tons, $6 billion in year of expenditure dollars. Then came the 2012 draft business plan, $65 to $74 billion. Each revision pushed the finish line further away. In 2014, the authority scaled back the scope, cutting the true high-speed segment short of Anaheim, but still the estimate stood at 65 point, with a 2028 completion date. Fast forward to 2025, and board member Anthony Williams dropped the bombshell on 60 Minutes, just over $125 billion. And still the money pit grows. This pattern of escalation reveals a systemic failure in cost control and forecasting. Facing overwhelming funding shortfalls, the authority made a strategic pivot in 2016. Instead of building the initial operating section from the Central Valley to San Jose, the logical link to the Bay Area, they shifted to the IOS North, focusing on the 119-mile valley segment first. The idea was to get tracks laid where land was cheaper and opposition less fierce. But this created a classic chicken and egg problem. Without connections to major population centers, no one would ride it. The route runs through farms and small towns, far from the California megaregions it was supposed to unite. Critics called it a train to nowhere, and the authority's own forecasts admitted this segment would not be profitable even if built. While the trains remain imaginary, the spending is very real. According to the authority's July 2022 executive summary, construction spending reached $83.7 million in a single month. By mid-2022, over $4.2 billion in state funds had been appropriated. As of 2025, total expenditures exceeded $15.7 billion. The federal government has also poured in billions only to see timelines slip. The U.S. Transportation Secretary recently called it a waste of taxpayers' money, noting the original 2020 completion date. That money has built viaducts, grade separations, and miles of guideway in the Central Valley, but not a single operating train. The contrast between cash spent and service delivered is perhaps the project's starkest indictment. In 2026, the authority released its latest draft business plan, pushing Phase 1 completion to 2032. The document, submitted to the state's legislative analyst's office, outlined yet another revised budget. But almost simultaneously, Congress moved to rescind $929 million in federal funds, citing the project's lack of progress. Senator Ted Cruz's investigation concluded that not a single train was operating after 25 years of subsidies. The business plan itself was dense and technical, but one thing was clear: the numbers kept rising, and the confidence kept falling. Even members of the state's own transportation committee began calling for the project to be scrapped entirely. As costs ballooned, the political winds shifted. Republican lawmakers like State Senator Tony Strickland labeled the project a failure, demanding it be stopped. But even neutral observers and watchdog groups raised alarms. The U.S. Department of Transportation released a damning report concluding there was no viable path forward. It cited missed deadlines, budget shortfalls, and overrepresentation of projected ridership. Meanwhile, the authority itself faced criticism for a $500 million change order approved in 2026, which some called another costly adjustment. Proponents argued the project would still deliver long-term benefits, but the weight of the numbers told a different story. Why did costs explode so dramatically? A confluence of factors. Land acquisition in California is notoriously expensive and time-consuming. The authority had to acquire hundreds of parcels, often through eminent domain, inviting lawsuits. Litigation from environmental groups, property owners, and cities added years of delay and legal fees. Inflation in construction materials, steel, concrete, labor further eroded budgets. The original estimates assumed smooth sailing, but reality was a minefield. Each lawsuit and delay compounded costs, turning a $33 billion vision into a $126 billion mirage. As one analysis noted, the project's very governance structure was unable to adapt to these predictable challenges. Even if built, the project faces a demand problem. The 2008 plan projected that over 100 million passengers would ride annually by 2030, but those numbers were, according to the DOT, grossly overrepresented. The Merced to Bakersfield segment standing alone would generate tiny ridership. The authority itself admitted it would not be profitable. Without connectivity to the Bay Area and Los Angeles, the train is a solution without a market. This raises the existential question: who will ride it? And if the full system ever materializes, will ticket revenues cover even operating costs? The business case, shaky from day one, has only weakened with time. The California high-speed rail saga is a textbook example of what goes wrong in large infrastructure. It began with a politically popular but analytically empty promise. Governance was fragmented, the authority lacked the power to control costs or deadlines. Funding was never secured up front, and when the scope shrank, the vision dissolved. International comparisons like Spain's AVE or France's TGV were built faster and cheaper by starting with strong central planning and realistic budgets. California's experiment shows that technical marvels cannot survive political expediency and financial fantasy. The lesson is clear: build the plan before you build the tracks. As of 2026, the Central Valley is dotted with concrete structures and construction crews. But after 18 years and billions spent, the passenger is still waiting. The latest business plan sets 2032 as the new dawn, but that target has shifted so many times it feels like a mirage. Meanwhile, the state faces budget deficits, and federal patience is exhausted. The High-Speed Rail Authority presses on, insisting that construction milestones are being met. But for Californians who were promised a world-class transit system, the only thing fast about this project has been the rate at which costs have risen. The train to nowhere, it seems, is still not leaving the station.